The Houston Rockets are a big threat to Oklahoma City, but what would be considered a successful team season for Houston? We're going to talk about it all on today's Locked On Thunder, Locked On Rockets crossover.
You are Locked On NBA crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder, Locked On Rockets crossover episode. Let's dive into a season preview for both teams, two of the biggest contenders in the Western Conference, a busy offseason for Houston, a mundane offseason for Oklahoma City. Where does this all shake out? I'm Rylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder. That's Jackson Gatlin, host of Locked On Rockets. You can also find us on Locked On NBA Game Night throughout the week. On today's show, which is Locked On Thunder, Locked On Rockets, your teams every day. For you everydayers, we've done crossovers before that you might have been accustomed to. We're doing one again because, Jackson, your Houston Rockets have jumped into the fray. What was this offseason like watching them go get Kevin Durant and kind of steal some thunder from Game 7 of the NBA Finals?
Oh, calm down, Reggie Miller, all right? There's no pun intended there. All right, look, this offseason has been a roller coaster, right? Because the Rockets have been on this upwards climb, this upwards ascension, right? They went through their rebuilding years, and in 2 years now with Ime Udoka, I think they've, maybe overachieved a little bit, gotten back to a level that not many people saw them at before this last season began, right? Myself included. I thought that, a successful year would have been, vying for a spot in the playoffs, but I thought, maybe, hovering if all things broke really well, like 4th, 5th, 6th seed. I don't think anybody would have had them, finishing as the second best team in the Western Conference and one of the best teams throughout the NBA for a majority of the season, right? With wins against the Thunder, the Cavs, the Knicks. They took jabs at everybody throughout the year, and they really kind of carved out a name for themselves. And there's a lot of credit to Ime Udoka for the turnaround. But then you get to this offseason, right? And they had a hard-fought 7-game series against the Warriors, a team that I don't think a lot of people really understood just how good they really were. And then they immediately made it to the second round. Steph gets injured, and then you don't really get to see them at full strength against a Wolves team that did go on to, make it to the conference finals. So, that Warriors team played like a top 4, top 5 team after the Jimmy Butler trade. And the Rockets unfortunately drew them in the first round, right? Which is a really tough series. So the offseason has just been this whirlwind of like, okay, where do you go from here? You had a hard-fought 7-game series. How does this team grow and improve? Do they just bank on continuity? And then bam, Kevin Durant trade comes down the pipeline. And suddenly now we're talking about the Rockets as not this up and coming, like plucky, like, maybe they're an underdog kind of team, sneak in, to a conference finals trip or something like that. Now it's like, oh, they're in the upper echelon now, right? That's what the Kevin Durant trade signifies. They are one of the heavy hitter teams in the NBA. And even though they're not quite as proven as some of the other heavy hitters out there, I think you have to give them at least some of the benefit of the doubt, given Kevin Durant's track record and just how good they were this past season without Kevin Durant.
Yeah, how good they were this past season, how proven Kevin is, how proven the coach is, how proven that you go get a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith. And I think that's an underrated addition because of how his role changes. Like with the caliber of defense that Houston is, him moving down the ladder of like assignments on defense, I think will actually heighten his value on that end of the floor for this Rockets team. Added to the front court, getting Clint Capela back and having Steven Adams still there. And of course, Sengun's been incredible. Nobody this summer has improved their Q rating more than Sengun, even though Matt Moore will not budge on his stance quite yet. But Jackson, we'll save those shots from you as you take shots just like the Rockets do. Everybody on the squad shows. Jackson,
it's okay. Let Matt Moore just yell and ramble and old man, shaking his fist at the clouds from the old people's home. Okay.
We'll let that happen. We'll, of course, get a squad show pretty soon where you guys can go at it yet again. But when you look at this Rockets team, let's assimilate to each other's channel here, as I'm sure you've, of course, talked about this as I have. What's the clear-cut tier in the West, and where did the Rockets fall into that? Where did the Thunder fall into that?
I think, without a doubt, the Thunder are in a tier of their own. They deserve that. They've earned that right. They are in a tier of their own. They just came off a season with a historic NBA defense, and the only question I have in my mind about the Thunder, honestly, at this stage, because they're basically running the whole squad back, is will they have the same drive, desire, hunger. And I hate when we have to quantify it that way, because it's hard to quantify that. It's not something you can point to a stat sheet and say, oh yeah, they were hungry enough to win the title. But there is a known effect, right? They call it the championship hangover, whatever, of how hard will this team go this next season to be the best team in the NBA, to play the level of swarming defense they played night in and night out all this past season, when they still were all playing with a chip on their shoulders, when they had that something to prove. I don't think it's a given that it goes away, but I also don't think that it's a given that it's going to be an identical one-to-one from what it was last season. But even despite that minor concern, they're clearly the team to beat in the NBA. They're the reigning champs, and they deserve to be in a tier of their own. And that's not just in the Western Conference. That's in the entire NBA. The Thunder are in a tier of their own. They have the reigning MVP in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, arguably the most unguardable offensive force in the NBA. I think Kevin Durant might have something to say about that this next season. But there's a lot to like there, and they're only going to get better, and they're still one of the youngest teams in the NBA. So for all those reasons, they are in like the S tier of contender by themselves. But then you look at the lay of the land in the Western Conference, and you can make incredibly compelling arguments for a number of teams. You can make a very significant argument for the Denver Nuggets and their depth and the acquisitions that they made this offseason. I loved what they did this offseason, not as a fellow Western Conference competitor, but just as a basketball fan. The Thunder addressed some of their biggest needs. They have depth now, which is crazy because they haven't had this kind of deep roster in the Jokic era. Even the Clippers are top to bottom stacked with talent. Now, granted, they look like they belong in the same old people's home as Matt Moore, but like if they can survive the regular season and not get, worn down due to injuries, and if the age of the roster isn't a big barrier, if they can make it to the postseason healthy, that roster is so talented top to bottom. But I do think that the Rockets should be in that next tier behind the Thunder. You can say they're in the same tier as Denver and the Clippers, but I think they're at the top of that next tier because the defense is legit. They finished as a top 5 defense this past year. I would wager that they're going to finish somewhere in top 3 this next season. And Kevin Durant addresses what was quite literally the biggest weakness, the Achilles heel of this team this past season, which was the fact that they don't have a closer, or they didn't have a closer. They didn't have a go-to guy to get them out of sticky situations late in games. They didn't have that go-to bucket getter, that alpha level scorer that they so desperately needed at various points throughout the season and very clearly needed in the playoffs against the Warriors. That guy was supposed to be Jalen Green, and the games where he could live up to the expectations of being the number 2 overall pick and being that future star scoring guard, those games looked incredible. The Rockets were damn near undefeated in games where Jalen Green scored 30 plus, but in the games where he didn't or couldn't, those were the games that looked really rough. You know who's a guy that doesn't really ever have many games where he can't or won't score efficiently and on high volume? Kevin Durant. That guy's pretty good at scoring the basketball, and that was the biggest weakness for the Rockets last season.
And I think that we're on the same wavelength there. I do have the Thunder in a tier by themselves, the deepest, most talented team in the league. We'll see how they handle being, the sought after team, being the hunted team that they're going to be this season. But for now, they're in the tier by themselves. I have a shorter tier 2. I just don't include anyone but Houston and Denver. And my ranking in that tier 2 behind Oklahoma City, it does default to Denver ahead of Houston, but it's only because of the best player in the world argument for Jokic and an offseason for Denver, much like Houston. They both have won the summer, Denver doing it in ways of executing transactions that you didn't know was possible heading into the season. I think that the swap with Cam Johnson's a big deal. I think that they do, like you said, have the most depth of their roster that they've had in the Jokic era since Jokic just became this anyway. And they took the Thunder to 7 games last year with a team that had 5.5 rotational players. And by the end of that series, only 3 of them were healthy. And so I think that when you look at this Denver team, I give them a slight proven edge over Houston, but it's very, very slight. It's very, very neck and neck. And that's why I have them in a defined tier there. So it's clear that everyone expects Houston to be legit this season. Everybody expects Houston to be contenders this season. But it's also clear from what we've talked about with the West, the pathway to the eventual NBA finals or to the Western Conference finals or whatever is going to be really, really difficult. So I want to know what constitutes a success for Houston, what constitutes a success for Oklahoma City in this year of trying to repeat in this new parity era. And what does this matchup look like now? Because a year ago, Houston played a lot of good games against Oklahoma City, and it was a default back to, well, yeah, but if Fred VanVleet doesn't score 38, they're not going to win those games. So we're going to get this on opening night. What are we going to see in this matchup all coming up on today's show? But first, I want to say right now, but your friends over at Monarch Money, go check out Monarch Money today, because most people can't even name all of their financial accounts or even give you what they're worth, whether they're 401ks, properties, investments. When you get the full picture, you're going to be able to keep all your money on the table and not leave it there without the full picture. That's why Monarch Money is the best all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life into one clean, easy-to-read interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. You can put off organizing your finances, but Monarch Money is for you, because they can jump in, do the heavy lifting for you. They can link all your accounts in minutes and see clear data visuals and smart categorizations for your spending, and it takes control of your money without touching a single spreadsheet for you. I love the fact that in that categorization, in those visuals, you can see a basic breakdown, stuff like how much money are you spending per month on subscriptions. And we've all been there, where we rack up these subscriptions, and then you come to realize you don't really use X subscription too much. So you can kind of take that one away and save yourself some money there. Those are the little things to big things that Monarch Money can do for you. So do not let financial opportunities walk by and slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com on your browser to get half a year off. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA. We're back on the Locked On Thunder, Locked On Rockets crossover episode. I'm Rylan Stiles. That's Jackson Gatlin. We're diving in for you every day about what these two teams will look like this season. Thunder with one championship in the bag, but now trying to repeat a feat that's been pretty difficult in recent NBA vintages. The champions of the last 7 years haven't made it out of the second round, and the path to get out of the second round can be very difficult for Oklahoma City, even if they get their third straight number one seed. What if one of Houston or Denver, for example, maybe just doesn't have the regular season you expect, but they're the 4 seed, they win their first round matchup, and now you're having to play a heavy hitter right out of the gate in the second round to even get to that Western Conference Finals. A lot still to be decided in the West. Jackson, we saw these two teams play very competitively all throughout the season, got an even bonus game in that NBA Cup semifinal. What did you like about what Houston's approach was to Oklahoma City? What can they do now with the additions of Kevin Durant, Dorian Finney-Smith, the front court, et cetera? And what still kind of concerns you about going up against OKC?
Okay, so I think one of the things that is underrated about what Houston does, which is kind of like, it's almost like they're built to take away one of OKC's biggest strengths, which is the Thunder's ability to force turnovers, right, and get out in the open court and play fast, play in transition, or just not even if you're not getting out and running in transition, which doesn't happen as often in the postseason, right? Things slow to a crawl, but just the ability to disrupt on defense, right, by forcing turnovers, by swarming the basketball, that historic defense that we already mentioned. The Rockets are not a team that passes the ball a ton. They average their bottom 3, bottom 5, I'm going off rip here, in passes per game in the NBA. They don't average a ton of assists. This is not like the beautiful game Spurs or any of that stuff. Like, they just are efficient and effective with some of their passes, and they just, they run a very simple offense. And at times, much to the chagrin of Rockets fans, right, we wished we would see a little bit more, creativity maybe in the offense from Ime Udoka. And maybe that comes with the addition of Kevin Durant. Maybe that unlocks being able to do a little bit more offensively. But when you think about a matchup with the Thunder, by limiting those passes, by limiting the opportunities where you might turn over the ball and then ignite a fast break, or just giving sheer volume, more opportunities to the Thunder offense, that was, a little bit, their bread and butter at times, was just being able to bank on their defense to overwhelm and just have more sheer bites at the apple on offense than the opposing team. And so you'd be able to win some games just on sheer volume. So when you go back and look at some of those matchups between the Rockets and Thunder, the Rockets did a pretty admirable job of taking care of the basketball, not turning the ball over. And as simple as that sounds, that takes away one of what feels like the biggest weapons for the Thunder. So in that regard, I think the Rockets, that will probably stay more or less the same. I can't imagine that adding Kevin Durant is suddenly going to have the Rockets, flying around and passing the ball, 10 plus times on any given possession. They'll probably keep things relatively simple. They'll play a lot through Kevin Durant. He'll have plenty of opportunities to isolate, run 2-man game with Alperen Sengun. They'll run him off the ball a considerable amount, I'm sure. And Fred VanVleet will still be the main guy handling the basketball, initiating offense. The one area that it gets a little questionable is Thompson is going to take a big step forward with his responsibility in the offense this year. And he's not a truly proven ball handler yet, right? This still at times looks a little rough around the edges, especially in the half court. And that could be an area of growing pain for this Houston Rockets team, is as they allow Amen to get these on-ball reps, are they going to be able to maintain that good, that ability to take care of the basketball and limiting those turnovers, both against the Thunder and against any other team in the NBA for that matter? Because that's been one of the strengths since Ime Udoka took over, is just limiting turnovers, playing smart basketball, taking care of the basketball, and just garnering extra opportunities by not needlessly forking it over. When you look at this Thunder team, though, the thing that maybe arguably scares me the most is just how incredibly versatile they are, and the fact that they can win in so many different ways. Like, it's not one way that they beat you. And what's even scarier is the fact that J-Dub is on this upwards ascension as well, becoming a star player in his own right. It's not just the SGA show, right? We saw J-Dub have some stellar games throughout this playoff run, throughout this title run. And it doesn't, it certainly felt like at times, oh, well, if SGA doesn't go off for 25, 30 plus, then the Thunder aren't going to be able to win. Now it's like, maybe we might be heading into a season or an era where SGA doesn't have to be MVP level SGA every night or against the upper echelon opponents for them to be able to have a chance to, compete or win the game convincingly, because J-Dub is evolving in his own right into a star level player. And so that's the thing that scares me the most, is now it's not just about stopping SGA. It's about finding a way to stop SGA and J-Dub in a given game where they can both go off and either one of them can carry the Thunder to a win.
Yeah, and I think that for Oklahoma City, you're really expecting another leap from, of course, the sustainability of what J-Dub did in the playoffs with a torn ligament in his wrist to drop 40 points in the finals and to do all that he did. You're expecting that to be sustained. You're expecting Chet to be better offensively than what he was whenever he returned from his hip fracture. You're expecting Cason Wallace to get back to where he was as a rookie from three-point percentage-wise and upping the volume, because he should be spoon-fed easy buckets as he was a year ago, and just convert on more of them. And then when you're looking at Houston, the thing that concerns me the most, looking at this from a vantage point of not just the Thunder, but obviously that's what we're talking about here, but for every team, what makes Houston, I think, very interesting is it's not just about the production that Kevin Durant adds comparatively to like Jalen Green or to any scores that they had a year ago. That's clearly a massive win for Houston. But what's the domino effect from that? Where do you see Kevin making this team better when you're looking at Alpi and having him in more advantageous situations? When you're looking at Jabari Smith Jr. and Dorian Finney-Smith is a guy that's elite in the corner. Like, where do you see this offense trending? Not just in, okay, that's an easy 30 points a night from Kevin instead of what you had, but also, hey, his life gets easier. His life gets easier. This can happen for Houston that didn't happen a year ago. Like, where are those keys for Houston?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the gravity that KD provides, right? He's going to make life so much easier for his teammates. And I think that's an underrated thing about, when you do have stars, again, just using SGA and J-Dub as the example, right? The threat, the fact that J-Dub can only be guarded by the opposing team's second best perimeter defender each and every night means that he doesn't have to go up against the team's best defender, which makes life easier for him because that task falls to whoever's guarding SGA. And some teams have, two, 1A defenders, whatever, but it's rare, right? And so I think for KD, the fact that at the end of games, yeah, you can just say, oh, we'll just dump the ball into KD and he can ISO and like get us a game-winning bucket, whatever. Like, sure, that's one way to approach things. But the other way to think about things is imagine him, running like two-man actions with Alperen Sengun, or running pick and roll with Amen Thompson, or different things that they can do to make life easier for the other, or that he can do specifically to make life easier for the other four guys on the floor. That weight, that basically having like the security blanket that is Kevin Durant out there to attract so much attention. Alperen Sengun has, at least last season, recorded the second most number of double teams commanded in the NBA, only behind Nikola Jokic. And the Rockets offense was still pretty abysmal despite that fact, right? Sengun commands so much attention. He has so much gravity unto himself, but his teammates weren't always able to capitalize off of that. And so now he has a teammate who has at least equal to or greater than the amount of gravity that he has as far as the attention to detail, where he's out on a scouting report, all that stuff in Kevin Durant, which should then lead to some incredibly easy opportunities offensively for Alperen Sengun. And one of the things that really fascinates me about the the roster construction for both of these teams is, weirdly enough, Rylan, I kind of feel like the Rockets are just like a wing-oriented version of the Thunder in a weird way. Because walk with me on this, right? You've got SGA, your MVP level, like primary scoring option, right? The offense runs through him. Kevin Durant, same thing for the Rockets, just, you know, a teensy bit older. Then you've got like this plethora of 3-and-D players. I'm going to say players because for the Thunder, it's primarily guards, right? And then for the Rockets, it's going to be primarily wings. They're guard light. And they've got Fred VanVleet, Reed Shepherd, and that's it. Everybody else is like 6'7" or bigger on the Rockets. So they kind of constructed a similar thing to the Thunder, just a slightly bigger version of that. Now, whether that ultimately pays dividends or whether they're going to be, you know, missing some guard play here and there throughout the season is to be determined. But these teams are built very similarly, and they can both play a variety of ways. The Thunder can play big with the double big lineup if they want to. They can run small if they want to. The Rockets, same thing. They can run with their version of the double big lineups, and they added Clint Capela as well, so they have a third option there. Or they can run small with their, like, what is likely going to be their death lineup in some games, where you have a lineup featuring Thompson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Tari, Eason, Jabari Smith Jr., and Kevin Durant, a 5-out switch everything kind of lineup that is going to wreak havoc defensively. And I don't know how you're going to guard that lineup on offense, but teams are going to have to try to find a way.
I can't wait to see these two teams clash. I'm so glad we're getting it on opening night. We're going to talk about opening night. We're going to talk about what would be a success for Houston stepping into this contender status. Do they need to get to the finals? Do they need to get to the West Finals? What are we looking at with this Rockets team coming up? But first, I want to say right now, put your friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packets of caffeine have the caffeine of a premier 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most about how portable they are. They have the big taste, but in a very tiny shot, and you can take it anywhere. And you can throw it in your pocket, in your book bag, in your briefcase, whatever you're toting around, you can have a 5 Hour Energy shot there to get that boost when you need it. I love to use it as like a midday pick-me-up. It's 2 ounces of all that punch of caffeine without, you know, going and getting a cup of coffee, which is going to drain your pocketbook, but also it's a lot more ounces to take in compared to the 2-ounce shot of 5 Hour Energy. It's enough with the boringness, the flavorless caffeine. It's time to get you some caffeine that has a massive flavor upgrade, and that's what happens with 5 Hour Energy shots. Get your favorite flavors that you love with a bold taste by going to 5 Hour Energy right now. You can go online to www.com, 5hourenergy.com, or I'm on Amazon today. 5 Hour Energy shots are there for you. Make sure you check them out today because I love that there's no sugar, so no crash at the end of the 5 Hour Energy bottle. All right, we're back on the Locked On Thunder, Locked On Rockets crossover. Jackson, obviously the Thunder last year had to deal with some pressures of not only the success that they had a year ago, being the 1 seed heading into last season, not only the offseason additions that they had that bolstered their status, similar to the Rockets. You bring in Case, and you bring in Caruso, you bring in Hartenstein, and this is a team that was expected to win a championship. Then you follow that up with winning 68 games and having this historic regular season where it felt like it would be all for nothing without a ring at the end. The Thunder luckily got their ring at the end while dealing with some challenges along the way. The Rockets had a great season last year. They were unexpectedly the 2nd seed as we went over. They had a great offseason. I mean, if they are in the top 3 of NBA offseason winners, depending on how you slice it, I would put them at number 1 because of the Kevin Durant, price sticker being so large. What does that look like, though, whenever you take a step back and you're like, okay, well, how would you feel if the Rocket season played out X, Y, and Z way, considering how tough the West is, considering what I think is a long runway, even though Kevin Durant's older, obviously, it's just not about Kevin Durant. You left so much dry powder on the table in terms of assets, and you have such great young talent still in Houston that it's tough for me to put them in finals or bust category, even though Kevin Durant is aging and we don't know how much longer that he can be your number 1 option. So what is your expectation for this season with all of those moving parts and all of the uphill battle that is the Western Conference?
I'm glad you highlighted this point, Rylan, because one thing that I saw some, chronically online Rockets fans talking about is this idea that the Rockets are, quote unquote, championship or bust. And that's just, I couldn't be further from the truth, because a championship or bust move would necessitate that, okay, if you don't win a title, it's a bust. It's game over. And the Rockets are so far from that because this wasn't the all-in move. This wasn't their final attempt at being, making themselves contenders. This wasn't their, push all the chips to the center of the table. They have so many more moves that they could or will probably make further down the line. Or even if they decide they don't want to make any more moves to bolster this iteration of the roster, they have such an incredibly bright future because they still have so much young talent on the roster between Alperen Sengun and Amin Thompson, who are both projecting to be future legitimate star level players in the NBA, top 25, top 20 kind of guys. And when you have at least one of those guys, probably two if you're Houston, then you're still in contention territory. So it's not, if they don't win a title with KD, like the trade was bad. It was like, no, you're getting KD with the hopes of winning a title. Absolutely. Like the goal is definitely to win a championship, but it's not the end of the world if they don't. And I know that there's going to be some people who listen to this and like, he's already making excuses and something. That's just the reality of the situation. Only one team out of all 30 teams in the NBA, only one team can be crowned champion at the end of the year. And is it just an objective failure for the other 29 teams that they don't win? No, that's not how it works. This team, if they were to jump from a competitive first round exit, a 7-game series against a damn good Warriors team, then if they jump into a competitive Western Conference Finals, possibly against the OKC Thunder, right? Or if they make a finals trip, but they fall just a little bit short of a title, I think that's still an objectively absolutely phenomenal season, all things considered. Would it be a little bit disappointing, bittersweet that they couldn't, knock down the door or get it all the way done and win a title? Yes, but they're going to have more opportunities to do that, right? The thing about Kevin Durant, and one of the beautiful things about this trade is KD, knock on wood, should be a star whose skill set ages pretty gracefully. We're watching an era of NBA where, yes, LeBron James is a total freak of nature and he is the exception to the rule of father time and all that stuff. But KD, Steph Curry, these stars who are whose game is less reliant on the athleticism component of their game and more so dependent on the skill component, the jump shooting ability, all of that, the shot making, like these guys should age pretty gracefully. And even if KD isn't like a definitive top 10 player, even a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever, as long as he's still top 15, top 20, as he is on the decline and Amin Thompson and Alperen Sengun are on the, on their upwards trajectory, then you kind of imagine that they're going to be able to pick up some of the slack where maybe KD, it takes a little bit of a step back within, his role on this potential team. I think that the expectation is for the Rockets to make a deep postseason run. And I think the expectation is probably a Western Conference Finals trip because you look at the lay of the land of the Western Conference, and I feel very confident about the Rockets in any 7-game series, even against the Thunder. Like I'd feel, I wouldn't feel like this level of like, oh my God, the Thunder are just head and shoulders above. They are the better team. They would be the favorites in a series, but the Rockets would have a solid enough chance against OKC. And I think that this past postseason run, as good as the Thunder were, they're not the KD era Warriors. They're not the 90s Bulls. They're not some juggernaut team, at least not yet. And I'm going to say not yet because they are at the beginnings of what looks like a budding dynasty. And as SGA continues to still get better, as J-Dub gets better, as Chet gets better, as all these young guys on the roster get better, they might make me eat my words. And they could come out and win 70-plus games this next season, and I look like an idiot. So that's a distinct possibility. But at least from what we know about this team right now, the Nuggets took them to 7, and that was a very flawed, injured Nuggets roster. The Pacers pushed them to 7 in the finals. This Thunder team is probably beatable, at least right now from what we know about them. And so for the Rockets, I think a Western Conference Finals trip is probably the bar for a truly successful season, but you can't paint this team as championship or bust. That's just unfair to them.
Yeah, I think that for me, from the outside looking in for Houston, if they head into the season and as long as they don't lose to anyone not named Oklahoma City or Denver, like if those are the two teams that they lose to or they beat them and they win the championship, that's considered a success to me. If you lose to a team not named Oklahoma City or Denver, that's where it's like, how did that happen? Like, I just don't see that happening heading into this season. And then you'd have to see how it plays out. If they just play them straight up though, and there's no injuries, no disaster situation in Houston, if they lose to anyone but Oklahoma City or Denver, I'd be really puzzled by that. And then if you lose even the second round, just if that's how the bracket shakes out, it's the second round, and you lose to the best player in the world, Nikola Jokic, and Denver in a hard-fought 7-game series, similarly to like what Oklahoma City's been through, what Houston went through a year ago. Like if the point differential in a 7-game series would be like 0, and you just played really close games and you just lost. That's not a failure to me. You just kind of take that as disappointing because you had the opportunity to win. Clearly, you took them to 7 games, but it's disappointing and not like a disaster. Oklahoma City the same way. If you lose Oklahoma City, okay. If you beat them, I don't see you losing to really anyone else in that route. So I think that the East is so much worse than the West, and Houston is much better than everybody in the West, not named Oklahoma City and Denver. I think they're the same plane as Denver, a bit worse than Oklahoma City, just in the tier bracket that we laid out at the top of the show. So that's kind of where I'm at with Houston. Wherever those matchups fall is where those matchups fall. Hopefully, if both teams, the 1 and 2 seed, hopefully it happens in the conference finals, and then we're both right on this. But I would give them grace losing to OKC or Denver at any point. And then if you don't lose to those guys, then you're going to make it all the way.
Can we just highlight here for a moment? I'm really going to be so fascinated by the number 1 seed chase in the West this season, because as you already, referenced a couple times here, and now granted, I honestly hadn't even considered, Rylan, the fact that like maybe one of these 3 teams like underachieves a little bit and lands at like the 4 seed, because that'd be terrifying for whoever did earn the 1 seed. But like I'm sitting here thinking like these are the definitive 3 best teams in the conference, which, on paper means you're slotting them 1, 2, 3 in the playoff seeding order. It's going to be such a benefit for whoever does walk away with the 1 seed, because then on paper, you're not facing one of these other 2 teams, the Rockets or the Thunder, Rockets, Thunder, or Nuggets, until the conference finals. Like that's the crazy thing. Yeah. And so like, I think there's actually going to be kind of maybe some pressure in the regular season for one of these teams to try and push the envelope and truly finish as the number 1 seed, to be able to take that easier path to the finals. To reference Eurobasket that we've been covering over at Locked On Rockets, and I don't know if you've been talking about it a little bit over at Locked On Thunder, but we've been talking about it on Locked On NBA Game Night as well. Turkey lucked out, not lucked out, but they earned the top seed in their bracket, and they avoided being upset by Finland in the round of 16 like Serbia was. Like had Turkey lost that game, then they would have been in Serbia's shoes and potentially gotten upset by Lauri Markkanen in Finland. So seeding is a big factor here in the Western Conference, and could be the difference between a Thunder title defense and a Rockets trip to the finals, or Jokic winning his 2nd title. Like there's so many things that are going to be at play here with how the seeding ultimately shakes out in the West. I'm fascinated by it, man.
Yeah, I can't wait. I mean, and what if you get to a point in this season where it's like, okay, I trust Oklahoma City and I trust Houston to not only take the regular season seriously, but be good enough to just win games. I mean, they're so deep, they're so talented that like I trust them to be 1 and 2 in the regular season. Now Denver needs to do their job and be the 3 to make the 1 valuable. But what if you get to a point in the season where it's clear Denver's going to be locked in that 4 or 5 again? They just are going through the motions. They just don't care. And then Houston and Oklahoma City are out here battling it out win for win. Do you get to a point where you're like, okay, I'd rather have the 2 seed if the reward for the 1 seed.
I'm excited because I am calling it now, Rylan. We're gonna see some funky like playoff jockeying at the end, where it's like some positional seeding where it's like, yeah, we'll throw away a game or 2 just so that we can like guarantee we'll be in the 2-3 bracket and avoid let OKC deal with the Nuggets as the 1-4 matchup. Like it's gonna be so funny to watch, man.
It's gonna be hilarious, and I think that the NBA got this right. I mean, opening night. First of all, Oklahoma City's market would be happy playing anyone. I mean, they'd be happy playing an elementary school team on opening night. It's banner night, it's ring night, it's everything. And then Houston, they'd be happy playing anybody because you want to see your shiny new toys and your new era. But to make it the best team in basketball against the most improved team this summer in basketball on opening night on a new TV network, I think draws in every basketball fan ever on a Tuesday night with no football that you're competing with, no nothing, except for maybe action. And it's like, this is kind of it. I can't wait to see how it goes. And good news for Locked On Rockets listeners. The opponents on banner night have actually had a lot of success recently. So maybe that's at play here. But Kevin Durant back in the Paycom Center, this time a Rocket, as the Thunder drop their banner. Jackson, this was a lot of fun. I think that we're going to have to do many of these shows throughout the season and into the postseason. So I cannot wait for that. But this was awesome.
I just want to say that the last time the Rockets opened their season against a team that was presenting their banner, it was against the Warriors. And it was the season that they added Chris Paul, and they spoiled the Warriors banner ceremony. So that might be a possibility here in play for Kevin Durant and the Houston Rockets. I'm just throwing that out there, Rylan.
Will history repeat itself? We'll find out together on October 21st. Until then, you have Locked On Thunder, you have Locked On Rockets every single day on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the everydayers. And until next time, be good and be good to one.